had a great summer break. So unfortunately, the novel coronavirus has impacted virtually everyone's life, so I'll have to explain the basics of rebuttals through the computer. My name is Kenneth Huynh, and let me pull up the next slide real quick. So my name is Kenneth Huynh, and I am a Doodle alumni. I've competed in many Doodle tournaments and speech events such as impromptu, poetry, and many more. My forte is in debate, however, and I have competed in cross-examination debates, public forum debate, congressional debate, and two of my personal favorite debate formats were Lincoln Douglas debate and big questions debate. I have competed at Chasten and NSDA tournaments, performing well in those two. I've competed in all 4 years of my high school career, so to say the least, I have some experience with debates and especially with rebuttals, which is the highlight of this video, of course. So for those who are briefly watching this video, debate has changed my life very, very much, and many people who have done debate can attest for themselves too. Debate is a new style of learning education, also approaching conversations, allowing you to create a new mindset. So this is why I have for the why debate a bullet point. It's really a new way to analyze information given to you. It's a new way to critically think on your feet. If there's one thing I would say that everyone takes away after joining either speech or debates, is learning more about yourself and how you voice your thoughts, which is obviously the most important thing that you can get that applies everywhere in your life. So this video is intended to highlight only rebuttals. So if you're looking for more basic sections in debates, you can go through some of the other Doodle Summer Series videos and in the debate section. So let's jump right into it. So the raw definition of rebuttals is the act of using reasoning and evidence to reject some sort of claim. Now, when you read this, it makes sense, and you most likely have done it yourself 99% of the, probably 99% of the time. Let's say your parents are very adamant about not letting you go outside to see your friends due to the coronavirus. So you come up with a response. Typically, we're lacking in evidence, but includes very good reasoning. And you say something like, we're social animals and we're meant to interact, and since we're cognitively developed, we will follow social distancing rules and wear masks. This will make your parents either accept your rebuttal or reject it with a following statement. So that's a quick example of what a rebuttal is. It's honestly, in modern slang, we could say it is like a comeback. Rebuttals are very important in all arguments in a debate round, and they all need to have some sort of response. Due to many variables such as time constraints, most of your rebuttals will be through reasoning and logic instead of combined evidence and reasoning. Preferably, if you have direct response with evidence such as a quote from a valuable individual, statistics that contradict an argument, or something along those lines, that is when you employ the evidence. If the evidence is a stretch, meaning you would have to manipulate the evidence or some sort of manipulate the claim, it is best to just use reasoning and logic through the flaws of the opponent's arguments rather than manipulate the evidence to create some sort of contradiction. So we see here, can a rebuttal win you a round? Yes. Can failing to provide a rebuttal cause you to lose a round? Absolutely. So rebuttals, like I've said, or like comebacks, we just call them rebuttals for formality. If an argument is stated in a round, it is on the table, and if it is left unaddressed, it will remain true and linger through the debate round. It's like a deadly bacteria that is weak early on, but eventually it can build momentum, and in the later phases of the debate round, it may be very difficult or even impossible to create a rebuttal for what is already taken as true through the several phases in a round. It is best to address major arguments and then the micro arguments by partitioning your time accordingly. Let's take an example. So let's say I say dogs are awesome because they're loyal, great with kids, protects you, and are very cute. And the opponents have only replied to the point that they're great with kids, replied to your point that one, they're great with kids and protects you by illustrating that dogs do attack their owners, but the fact that they leave that the dogs are loyal and that the dogs are cute undressed, this will continue to remain true in the debate round. So it's very important that you address every single point that is brought up, even if it seems like not as important. Many things that may seem not important to you may be something that the judge takes note of. Many of you may have already learned this, but for those who are learning like the basics right now, it's good to go over some of the argumentation. My apologies. The argumentation construction, which follows three main components. So a claim, which is a assertion that supports an argument, there's three components: evidence slash supports through facts, and we see facts and reasoning and additional information gathered to support the claim, and warrant is the reasoning that connects the evidence to that claim. If I state that masks help prevent you from catching coronavirus, my evidence is that most cloth masks will prevent particles and droplets that are as small as 10 micrometers. Then my warrant would be that coronavirus is around 15 to 20 micrometers, which is large enough for the mask to prevent it. So that's a quick rundown of the claim, evidence, and warrant. So we want to state some sort of claim, provide evidence for that claim, or some sort of support. It could be a quote, a fact, a reason, additional information, and then run it through with some sort of warrant that you have to state yourself. So let's go on to the next. Okay, so some of you may have not already learned about different argumentation types, but there are different methods and types of arguments. So there's something called the a priori argument, which is an argument that is not ever based on our personal experiences of the world, but instead relies on reason alone. For example, if all monks are unmarried men, and we define unmarried men having no wives, then monks have no wives. So you can see how it flows. You see how it's all logical. I'm not biased if I know monks are married or not in modern society. It's nothing like that. It's more logical reasoning alone, and typically judges can follow this very well. Your opponents can follow this very well, and it should be a clean and cut argument. A deductive argument develops logical conclusions formed from supporting statements that are taken as true premises. Essentially, it takes a general statement into a specific instance. Major premise, for example, let's say there's this person, and its name is Joshua. He lives in the United States. So that's the major premise. The minor premise is that because Joshua lives in the United States, Joshua has an obligation not to harm others through social contract. And then we'll talk about that furthermore. But deductive arguments follow a logical conclusion from typically what is seen as a major premise. And lastly, there's something called an analytical argument, which is what we have down here. I've also included an example with a social contract and Tim living in Europe. So for example, the general one is that people who live in the United States are protected by a social contract, and since Tim lives in Europe, he does not reap the benefits of those who live in the US. Okay, so let's continue. Lastly, there is something called an analytical argument, which takes the truth or falsity through an absolute definition or a data-based argument. So for example, it's very similar to a priori one, but this one is going to be based on adding statistics, facts, anything like that. So for example, according to the CDC, studies suggest that many people who have the coronavirus are actually asymptomatic, meaning that they have no symptoms. It's a fact, and it's included, it's argument that we can develop out of that. So there are many more different types of argumentation styles, so it is not limited to these three. These are just the most frequent ones, and oftentimes additional types of arguments may fall under one of these three categories. So let's take a moment and go through a sample debate. So if you need a break, you can just pause the video right now, but I'm just going to hop right into it. So let's say a topic is should individuals be required to vaccinate? For those who are on the affirmative side, they would say yes. So one, for the safety of the community. So if statistics given from history, such as the case of smallpox, we would consider that analytical if that is the evidence that we use in support of safety for the community. Let's say two, it develops development of herd immunity. So herd immunity is an idea that it helps eradicate or minimize the threat of a contagious disease because a lot of people have the vaccination. They are immune to it. So it develops or helps eradicate that disease within a population. And within that, it would fall under a priori argument because it's a line of logic. And the third thing is that it prevents a spillover effect. Spillover effect is when it spreads from organism to organism. So this may depending on if you're going to offer statistics or if you're going to offer a line of reasoning. So I just gave you examples of a priori and also a analytical argument. So those on the negation side would state that it infringes upon different liberties. They lose the autonomy for their body, and we can force And then by forcing all individuals to have vaccinations, we force those who are immunocompromised, allergic, or inept, which means that inevitably, if they take the vaccine, it's not going to work. Will have repercussions that may harm them. So as you can see, these were just some quick ideas for pro and con that follow deductive reasoning, a priori argumentation, which is commonly seen in debates. Depending on your debate style, you could tailor your debate to be more evidence-based or logic-based. The better you get at debates, you can make a debate round be tailored to either evidence or logic, but your opponent also has to follow that style too. So oftentimes we can see two contradicting styles, and if you have enough magnitude or emphasis in the debate round, you can really tailor that and make the opponent have to debate against your logic or debate against your evidence. Okay, so let's go into the next part. Okay, so something that not a lot of individuals in the novice league do a lot is the idea of incorporating philosophical values and theories into their debates. Now this is a much higher, I would say a higher tier of debate, but it would be great for freshmen, sophomores to try to incorporate this into your debate round. So this moves away from analytical argumentation, which is like the evidence-based, and focus more on a priori. Philosophy can help you reason with the judge and have them mentally move themselves to see a new lens in this debate. So something that is commonly seen is the idea of deontology versus theology, theology, which is the idea of consequentialist ethics. So this is the idea of purpose versus result. So let's say that there's a robbery happening right down the street, and there's a bank, and in order to save all the money that's been stolen, we ended up shooting an innocent person. Should the person be held in trouble? So support for deontology would say no. They meant to shoot the robber, and theology, which is the consequentialist ethics, would say yes, even though they wanted to save all the money that was stolen and shoot the robber, they still harmed the innocent person's life. So we're really a philosophical idea. Let's say in a debate round, people are arguing, should we fund military in developing countries? And then we're talking about all these situations that could happen, and that's when you would bring up either theology or deontology, saying, our ideas, we really want to reconstruct the government, and even if they do end up doing something else, that's as long as our intentions were good, this is all that matters. So it really just depends on how you want to frame the debate. A lot of people don't mention this. We take it clean, cut, and dry. They just read the evidence, and then no one really debates more on it. So incorporating philosophy would be very useful. It's an amazing skill to develop a repertoire or have even 5 philosophical topics or ideas on the tip of your tongue, such as utilitarianism, categorical imperative ethics, social contract, cost-benefit analysis, and many more. I would recommend you to spend some time diving into some of these topics I have just mentioned, and it will put you at a new playing field going to your new debate season. Judges love hearing philosophical ideas. I hear it all the time, and I would suggest a combination of analytical, deductive reasoning, and philosophical ideas to create an awesome structure into your debate rounds to really nail down on your debate skills and also your probability of winning. So let's continue, and I believe we're going to go through the structure of how we would like you guys to approach a rebuttal. So in order to even formulate a rebuttal, you need to understand what your opponent is saying. How are we going to argue something if we don't understand what the opponent means? You may think the opponent says one thing or they mean one thing, but they actually mean a different thing. So at this point, there's no clash, meaning there's no direct argumentation, and then the debate gets messy for you, and then it gets messy for the judge. Ask questions on clarifications, definitions, and maybe something like, you mentioned blah, 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 blah. Are you saying that blah, 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 blah? So you're just confirming your idea of what they said. So that's a great way to deconstruct an argument and really understand what they're trying to say. A lot of evidence can really miss what or hide what the opponent is trying to get at, and this could be a tactic that they use, or just unintentionally that they may have done it. So the recommended rebuttal structure, which everybody uses. I used it senior year, I used it junior year, I used it all my debate career. People still use it in one way or another, but it's essentially, they say something, we say this, we win on blah, blah, blah. Essentially, this is a form of response from your point of view after hearing somebody. So You hear the opponent say one thing, you reword it so that gives the judge some context on what you're arguing on. You give your own rebuttal slash response to the arguments and why you win on that argument. For example, they say that, for example, so let's say I'm on the other side and they have just spoke about vaping. They say that vaping is not as bad as cigarettes. We say that vaping is even more dangerous than cigarettes, and we won on the argument that we have provided statistics on how cigarette puffs, how many cigarettes puffs you get out of one vaping puff, and also how much THC potency is in the cartridge for vape pens. So we really give the judge context for what you're debating on, and then give them context again on what your response to that was, and then you win on what argument, what aspect of the argument. So that's the idea. And if you have more questions, at the end I have my email, so you can always email me on anything like this, and you can say, hey, is this a solid rebuttal? Hey, I had a round and they said this, and this, and then I couldn't really think of anything. You can always contact me and we could figure something out. So now that we have a general idea, let's analyze a couple of examples with their claims and their respective evidence and or reasoning. So feel free to pause after each slide that I read so that you can think of critiques on your own. So awesome. And I'm going to look at my second monitor, so if you see me looking that way, that's because I'm just looking at my second monitor. So let's read the topic. The U.S. ought to provide foreign aid to developing countries. So the claim, developing nations are harmed disproportionately by climate change. The evidence that they provide, a 2013 report on the vulnerability of cities around the world to climate change showed that Dhaka, which is the capital of Bangladesh, is facing the most immediate and extreme effects of our fossil fuel use. By our, they meant the U.S. Dhaka has one of the lowest CO2 emissions of any major city in the world, which is at 0.6 per person. The 13 million people in Dhaka live in low-lying, crowded slums and rarely have access to clean water. If you compare their annual emissions with the United States, which is 18 tons per person, or Canadian average, which is 16 tons per person, you can see that there are exactly how unfair the situation is. Cases that prove lower GDPs and CO2 emissions, you have a higher risk for environmental catastrophes to occur. So we see the opponent said that developing countries are affected disproportionately by climate change. Right off the bat, I would say, so right now you can pause it and think of rebuttals. What was good about it? What was bad about it? What would you change about it? So just feel free to do that. I'm going to give my response to this. So we see how Bangladesh is disproportionately affected by climate change. You know, it's 0.6 tons per person, and they're facing all these dramatic and health effects, health or environmental effects from our fossil fuel use. We say that Bangladesh is actually affected, you know, we could say that Bangladesh is actually affected by, per se, China's pollution, because they're also a contributing member and not the United States and Canada. So there's no direct links in the evidence to illustrate that the pollution that we are causing is actually the issue that they are facing. And in addition, there's no measure of the magnitude between what US is facing and what Bangladesh is facing. Let's say that they're both facing really hot, extreme temperatures. We're both facing the same thing, but because the United States is more developed, the magnitude of how it affects us is less. That doesn't mean that they're disproportionately affected through the climate change. They're just affected more because they're a developing nation. This does not provide enough justification for why U.S. ought to provide foreign aid to developing countries. So this is just a quick response. You know, I don't see any direct links. I don't have any, honestly, no really good proof to really connect how U.S. Climate fossil fuel emissions and other extreme climate change effects affecting Bangladesh. So that's one way you can respond. There's many more, but a lot of this comes with practice, and you really have to think on your feet and also look through the evidence that you do have, so you could potentially go against the opponent. So let's go through the next thing. This is going to be on the other side, but same topic. So international welfare will develop if we provide foreign aid to provide aid to foreign countries. So evidence. By going through with this resolution, we set ourselves up in a system of international welfare situation. We will be creating a dependency where the affirmative, aka the United States, can never leave. It is in a developing country's self-interest not to become dependent Why would a developing country ever state that they are finally self-sustained? That ideology does not exist. We can always improve something in these developing countries. That is the same with the idea of perfect health. That idea, of course, is unachievable. So solid a priori argument. I really like that. Something that I would critique about it is that there's no evidence. Let's say we have evidence. Let's say that we have evidence readily available to talk about how we provided temporary aid to, let's say, to another country abroad that's developing. Let's say it's Sudan or any other country, or such as Afghanistan or Ethiopia, and it has really helped or helped benefit their infrastructure outcomes, and they're doing even better. Their GDP went up, anything like that. So it doesn't have to be an international welfare situation. So a lot of the a priori is also logically they line it up so it makes sense. If we give something, they're going to keep wanting it. But we haven't really illustrated why a country, we have the authority, we have the autonomy to stop aid. So that's also something to mention. So that's a way you could respond to this. So this is going to be on universal basic income. If you guys haven't learned, this was also an idea brought up by old Democratic candidate Andrew Yang. He talked about how he should provide every person over 18 $1,000 a month. That's the idea of a universal basic income for some context. So the claim is universal basic income will allow protection and security. So May 2017, researchers at the University of Oxford published that the results from a survey of the world's best artificial intelligence experts who predicted that there was a 50% chance of AI outperforming humans in all tasks within 45 years. And Stern argues that the United States is losing more jobs to automation and new technology, and this is only going to lose more. I think technology is going to destroy the labor market as we know it, and it's going to create a desperate need to find solutions in order to find social stability. Additionally, we have a society that measures progress. We should have a society that measures progress not just by economic metrics like GDP, but by how many of us actually have a role in life that we find meaningful. That's something that Zuckerberg said. We should explore ideas like universal basic income to make sure that everyone has a cushion to try new ideas. So awesome analytical evidence and also analytical argumentation. The first thing that jumps to me is that this is primarily filled with quotes. And you'll see this a lot too, somebody in the White House said blah, 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 blah. We don't take it as true. We never take things as true just because one person said it. When it's all really opinionated, and it really is going to tailor your claim to a particular way. So if we're going to say that universal basic income will allow protection and security, we don't have that as an inevitable thing in the sense that we cannot assure that we will have protection and security. We say that there's a 50% chance that AI outperforms humans in all tasks. Yeah, that's really bad, but by providing UBI, does that make it worse? Does it make it better? Are there any studies that have shown that UBI has improved very well? I know that there is some stuff in Australia that they have tried one time, and you guys can look into that too if that's something you're interested in. And they had some progress and some results from there too. So just based off of this, I prefer you guys, if you guys are going to debate for the first time, not to include too many quotes, but also try to include direct evidence that helps support your claim, because at this point, you're not proving your claim, which is the universal basic income will allow protection and security. I cannot assure, I am not convinced that I will get protection and security with UBI still. Okay, so the next one, the claim is immigrants without documentation looking for a prosperous futures are terminated by initiating a universal basic income. So there were 11 million unauthorized immigrants in the United States in 2015, according to a 2010 survey of the economic literature on the subject. The Brookings Institute concluded that the most recent academic research suggests that on average, immigrants did raise overall standard of living of American workers by boosting wages and lowering price. Many illegal immigrants work underground, earning less than minimum wage, which is often abused by the head employer. Although this is bad in the aft world, this is worse as individuals are now dying as a direct result of inflation due to increased velocity of money through the hands of American citizens. There will be a direct negative impact upon the illegal immigrants. For every few dollars that an undocumented worker earns, they have to work twice as hard to earn what they were going to initially get due to inflation of the country. This is a great argument. It has deductive, a priori, and analytical reasoning through all of it. So they give us some statistics of how many illegal immigrants there were, and then they also talked about how they raise the overall living standards, and then at the end they say that they have to work twice as hard, and then we're also impacting this sector of community, we're impacting the sector of community that we often don't pay a lot of attention to, and we're going to make it actually worse than it should be. I know that there's a lot of immigration policies and stuff going back and forth, but there's really not a lot of support for that community right now. There's a lot of small nonprofits and stuff like that. So by providing a claim like this, immigrants without documentation looking for prosperous futures are terminated. That's like it. The claim is accurate. The evidence is accurate. So this is a great example. I'm sure you guys can find out a couple of things you guys can pitch up. How did they raise the overall living standard of American workers? But it really just depends. Okay, and so this topic is on whether or not the United States should consider plea bargaining. Plea bargaining the claim is plea bargaining allows cycles of manipulation and racial disparity. So currently, African Americans are incarcerated at more than 5 times the rate of whites. The imprisonment rate for African American females is twice of a white female, and if African Americans and Hispanics were incarcerated at the same rate as whites, prison and jail populations would decline by almost 40%. Constitutional Right Foundation conducted a massive study of 700,000 California cases over a 10-year period, reported in December 1991 and 2001 that a third of white adults who were arrested had no prior record, were able to get a felony charge against them reduced. Only a quarter of African Americans and Latinos with no prior records were successful in plea bargaining. So first, we say that there's so with the claim, what I would attack on is that we're not really I guess inherently we could reason through that we're perpetuating cycles of manipulation, but just the evidence by itself, we are only proving that plea bargaining allows racial disparities. We've only shown racial disparities. We haven't really seen how it perpetuates. We haven't had direct evidence to show how it perpetuates cycles of manipulation, but we can do that with logical reasoning during cross-examination or anything like that. Okay, I think this is the last one. We've got 2 more. Okay, so the topic, the privacy of candidates for public office. So the claim democracies need information to prevent corruption. Fundamentally, the idea of democracy is taking things for the public, as Lincoln describes. When the freedom of the press is taken away from democracies, then the people of the democracy cannot fairly vote on a candidate. During the dictatorship of General Francisco Franco, the Spanish government put censorship over published books, movies, and documents that go against the government's beliefs. As a result, there were negative effects, and there was a decline in media diversity and national trust. So that was a great example of how we don't need statistics, but also be able to use some historical evidence to help illustrate how democracies need evidence to prevent corruption. We know that there was corruption in the Spanish government with the General Francisco Franco. There's a lot of historical applications, and also at the end we see that there were negative effects and there was a decline in media diversity and national trust. I think they could have expanded a little bit more and say where did they get the evidence of media diversity and national trust, but just by saying that is a great way to illustrate that, to conclude that this is a result of that. And guys, make sure if you are eligible to vote, please vote for this upcoming election. This is a very, very crucial time. It will affect you and your children. It will affect all our lifetime. So this is a very critical moment in history right now, with the coronavirus, with how we respond, with funding. There's so many dimensions in this. So guys, let's be educated. Go on websites on the actual what they're intending to put out once you go into office, and be able to determine what is false information, also reject those, and also find the accurate information and be able to rely on those. So guys, just please make sure to vote this upcoming election, and do yourself a big favor, do the community a big favor, and then essentially do the entire nation a big favor. So let's continue. So argumentation continue. So what makes the difference between a sound and unsound argument? So a sound argument is a valid deductive argument with true premises. Unsound argument is a deductive argument in which one or more of the premises are false. So, for example, this is a sound argument. Shortness of breath is a symptom of asthma. Yuri is asthmatic, therefore Yuri will experience shortness of breath. So logically, that is a sound argument. If Yuri is asthmatic, therefore we can conclude that Yuri will experience shortness of breath. This is an unsound argument, and there's a lot of unsound arguments out there that you'll hear, and you'll just have to catch those. So shortness of breath is a symptom of asthma. So same statement as the previous one. Shortness of breath is a symptom of asthma. Whereas now Yuri is experiencing shortness of breath. Therefore, Yuri has asthma. So that's where it's weird. So previously we have Yuri is asthmatic. Therefore, Yuri will experience shortness of breath. Whereas for the second one, the unsound, Yuri is experiencing shortness of breath. Therefore, Yuri has asthma. Obviously, we cannot determine from the second statement if Yuri has asthma, because shortness of breath can be due to many things. You could be going through the middle of a stroke because you'll start having shortness of breath. You could be having some sort of along those lines of cardiac arrest. You could be having you could have just ran and now you have shortness of breath. There's a lot of things from that. But when you state from the first sound argument, Yuri is asthmatic, you know that they will have shortness of breath because it is a symptom of asthma. So lastly, we have accurate line of reasoning to create a sound argument is the best way. So how to utilize cross-examination in question period. So you have to recognize the judge's preferences before a round. So this is sometimes called paradigms. You go into a debate round, you'll say, hey judge, what are your paradigms? What do you prefer? This is essentially telling them how they want the debate round to flow, what they prioritize, what they care about, what they don't care about, what they don't want to hear, all that other very valuable information that you as someone who's going to debate will take in consideration. So the next thing is you want to use the cross-examination and question periods to develop something called clash. And I've mentioned this earlier. It's basically direct argumentation between the opponents and yourself. So opportunities to catch opponents' misunderstandings and interpretations within their evidence or your evidence. Exploit a weak line of reasoning in front of the judge. If I can say, so essentially you're saying this, and then they stutter, they're not sure, this is a direct way for you to exploit a weak line of reasoning in front of the judge. It's also for you to critique arguments and receive a quick response. If a sound argument is sound, it will be cut and dry and the judge will understand their response to your question. But if there's some skepticism and critiquing the arguments and being able to provide a quick response is not going to be very good for the opponents and very good for yourself because you're able to catch something. So I'm not sure if they will still do a point-based system, but oftentimes cross-examinations and questioning periods are very critical in obtaining viewpoints to win a debate round and allowing you to succeed in a debate round and so on. So how do I approach arguments? So when I develop arguments, I want to make it straightforward for the judge and for the opponent. Sometimes people will make it hard to understand, or they'll provide high vocabulary or some sort of jumbled line of reasoning, and it's not clear cut. It's hard for the judge, it's hard for the opponent, it's hard for the entire debate round. Give the main contentions, captions, you want to say the claim, and maybe even provide subpoints. There's a lot of arguments and contentions that have many subpoints that are very useful that you should provide. Oftentimes, many times, everyone should use the claim, evidence, warrant structure. There's no reason why you should not use that because there's many ways you could frame it. So you could have warrant first, claim, and then evidence. You can manipulate it, but as long as you have three, it's very good. You have to know how to express precisely what you want to say. So I want to think about, what do I want to say about this evidence? What do I want to say about within this resolution? And then be able to dumb it down for myself so that whenever people question me on it, I know what to say. So the last thing is I want to nail down the opponent for what you want to debate on. So for example, if I've just said my speech, they've just said their speech, you want to address the micro arguments and the macro, like the large ones, but then you want to spend more time on what you really want to debate on and things you could potentially win on. And then the opponent will have to respond to that because you spent a little more time, you have a little bit more reasoning and logic behind that. They'll have to spend more time on that. So it's really just tailoring the argument to what you think benefits you. Sometimes the opponent will catch that. They'll spend a lot of time on their micro arguments, and then now you have to spend more time on their macro arguments. So it's really a back and forth. It's kind of like a game of chess. So listening. when something doesn't make sense, it probably isn't. So when you're listening to a rebuttal, if something doesn't make sense, it probably isn't accurate or logically sound. And the judge is probably thinking the exact same thing. Like, what did you just say? Ask if you're confused. It is all right. If they say something that's confusing, ask them, what did you mean by that? Or, and then it's still confusing, you can address it to the judge during your speech, like, Judge, the opponent said this, but logically, if we think about it, that wouldn't be a result of blah, 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 blah. So many different things. Taking notes is very important. As I've just wrote, it's very easy to forget things. They say one thing, they say a lot of things. You're just gonna forget it. So please take notes. There's something called flowing. I'm sure there'll be a summer series on that, but there's something called flowing, which is taking very good notes with abbreviations and within these boxes that are designated for a particular speech. And also listening for dropped arguments. When they drop an argument, you want to be able to address that and give it to them. And like present it to the judge by giving it to them. You want to present it to the judge and say, hey, during my opponent's last speech, they did not mention blah 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 blah. This continues to flow in the debate round because this is still pertinent in the debate. It's very crucial information and blah 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 blah. So it really just depends. But listening for dropped arguments is very important. So I believe this is the second to last. So benefits of being last speaker. So getting the last word in a rebuttal, if it's talking to your parents, talking to your friend, your sibling, it's always the best. You have your last words because you get to summarize the entire debate round. It really is like a time to allow the judge to relax, understand, have them understand essentially what you thought the entire debate round was about, what it revolved around, what mattered to you, why you wanted certain arguments that were very important in the debate. Remind the judge of what exactly happened during the entire round. Nail down on what exactly was important during the round, like I've mentioned. Bring up missed or dropped arguments. So if they've missed a lot of arguments, but they've only been addressing the big ones, and you have a lot of micro arguments here and there that you noticed that they really didn't respond to, you can bring that up in the last speech and they cannot respond because that's the last thing. And also attack the opponent's closing. This is something I really love. So they'll say, for example, they say, judge, vote on us because essentially in the end, we provide more safety for everybody and blah, 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 blah. So then when you're the last speaker, you get to say, Judge, in the last speech, my opponent mentioned that the main reason why they believe they won the debate round because they saved more people. I illustrate to you that we actually save more people and they're actually harming more people because blah, 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 blah. By having last speaker, you actually get to attack the opponent's last speech, which is one of my favorite things to do. So enjoy your upcoming debate season, guys. It is unreasonable to believe that you will win every debate round your first year. I've never met anyone who has won all their debate rounds in their first year. It's best for you to learn from those around you, apply their techniques, the techniques that you've seen that you find very useful or very interesting, and progress to be a better debater. It's not about winning, it's about learning to develop your logical reasoning. If you can focus on the learning aspect, the winning aspect will come naturally. So, guys, I'm really excited for you guys. Be passionate. If you don't continue to do research on argumentative techniques, watch videos, stay updated with the news, subscribe to a newsletter, many things like that. Watch additional videos for your growth. You will not enjoy debate if you don't do these things. It's going to seem like homework. It's going to seem like, an additional class. Debate is not about that. Debate is about developing yourself, but you can only develop yourself if you invest time in it. So if you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to me at kenneth.huynh@ucdenver.edu, and hopefully I can see you guys virtually when I judge for Doodle, or let's say we're hosting it in person. I'd be glad to meet you guys in person too. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, and I will see you guys later.